start. Okay. So the topic of this OPD, and before we kind of really jump into it, I'll give you some context. So I think the Army does a pretty poor job of educating its leaders in actual leadership. Okay. And I've done this experiment with you guys before, which is, do you know the principles of war yet?
No.
Okay, right. Do you know the principles? Right. So the Army doesn't teach us the principles of war very, very well, right, at all. And so what I want to do is, we're leaders in the military. The military fights wars. We should probably know the principles that govern warfare, right? So what we're going to start with is we start with those principles. And then we talk about offense and defense, and we talk about mission command, and we talk about how that plays into actual leadership. And then we go into what is the Army's leadership doctrine, right? And how do we develop other leaders? So that's kind of the big campaign plan. But today I want you to think big. Okay, think conceptually, think philosophically. That's kind of some of the things that we're going to be discussing. So put combined arms breach and link ups and how to plan for fires and all these technical things. Put those out of your mind and I want you to think philosophically and generally about warfare. Okay, so that's why I've titled this this class, "What is War?" Right. All right. So when I say the word war, like, what comes to y'all's heads? Like, what are some words when you think war? Like, what is war? What causes war? Like, what comes to your head when you think of that word war?
Just battles, history.
Okay, battles. History. What else?
Fighting, weaponry.
Fighting. Weapons. All right, what else? So expand on these. Like, what do you do in war? Kill. That's right. It's lethal. I mean, it's dangerous, right? You kill people. All right. What else? Oh, what causes war? What are some of the reasons we fight war?
Religion.
Religion. Okay. Definitely. We're talking about the history of war. Religion's definitely a reason. What else?
Government.
Government. All right. What else?
Just different types of society.
Okay. Society. So like culture.
Culture.
Right, cultures, maybe economics, right, different economic systems, economics, yeah, or if you're Frederick the Great, you invade Silesia to get iron ore, right, because you're trying to industrialize.
Resources, yeah.
Okay, resources, yeah, that's another good one, right, resources. All right, so if you look at ADP 3-0, paragraph 8, there's a great definition of war, right? It says that war is chaotic, right? It's chaos. It's lethal. And it says that it is a fundamentally human endeavor, right? And it talks about how the whole purpose of war is to change behavior, right? You want one group of people is trying to force another group of people to do something. They want to force their behavior to do it, right? In order to do that, you have to have conflict. You have armed conflict. And because people live on land, warfare, especially with the military, is primarily a land domain. All right. So when we actually look at doctrine, what you guys came up with, and then the other paragraphs, it talks about culture and how you need to understand it, and talks about economics, and talks about government in the other paragraphs. So believe it or not, like what you guys just came up with is the Army captures this in its doctrine about warfare, about how it defines what warfare actually is. Have you guys ever seen that before? No, right? Okay. So, we're going to talk about, so the other thing it talks about in ADP 3-0 is you have to be able to outsmart your enemy. You have to be able to ruthlessly take advantage of positions of relative advantage, or ruthlessly exploit positions of relative advantage. So once you get a relative advantage over your enemy, you have to ruthlessly exploit it, right? So if we just had leaderless armies where everyone was the same rank and was just sort of all doing whatever they wanted to fight, would that be an efficient way to fight?
No.
No, right? So we need to organize into groups to fight. All right, do you think that, I'm trying to think about how to put this. Basically, there are principles, what I'm getting at is there are principles that govern warfare, right? And those are the ones that I've talked about before. So we're going to talk about the principles of war and why they're important. Okay. So the acronym that we use to remember this, well, I'll write it this way. I learned MOSMOUS. Okay? That's how I was taught it, and that's probably the easiest way to remember it. There's like a Moses, Moose, or something like that. There's like a couple different ways to remember it. But we're going to go over these, and these are the principles that have governed warfare forever, right? And successful militaries, whether purposely or by accident, capture these principles of war in their strategic and operational thinking. Okay. All right. So the first one that we're going to talk about is maneuver. Well, I'll just go ahead and write them all up here. Well, we'll go one by one. All right. Maneuver. So what do we think maneuver means? Like just in general, as a principle.
Being able to move on the battlefield.
Got to be able to move around on the battlefield, right? You got to be able to get from point A to point B. And that's pretty simple, right? I mean, these aren't complicated concepts. I promise. These are all very, very simple. Yes, you have to be able to maneuver. You have to be able to get forces from one place to another, and you need to do it efficiently, which we'll talk about in a little bit. All right, the next is objective. What do you think objective means?
Like having a mission.
Okay, having a mission.
Having like a set goal for like what you're trying to do.
Perfect. A set goal. You want to be very clear about what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? You want to orient everybody in the same direction. Everyone needs to understand what are we trying to achieve? What's the objective we're trying to achieve? All right. What do you think one of these S's is? There's 3 S's in there.
Sustainment.
No, but we'll kind of get there. One of them is one of the characteristics of the offense.
Support. No, offense. You say.
Okay, surprise. All right, we'll go with surprise. All right, if you're super predictable, do you think you're going to be successful? No. Give me an example of in like history where you think that a general was able to surprise his enemy.
George Washington across the Delaware.
Okay, yeah, George Washington crossing the Delaware definitely surprised the enemy. Come on, you got something.
Don't know my military history.
All right.
Should.
I think the last time I taught this class, we talked about Stonewall Jackson in Chancellorsville, right? So he moved his Corps division, whatever he was in charge of, and then just completely surprised the Union Army. Ended up in a place that was not expected. So you can achieve surprise. All right, the next one is simplicity. All right, and there's a saying that Patton had about a plan. Do you guys remember what it was?
Something about like if the lowest like private can't understand it or can't brief it back.
He may have said something like that. So basically he says, I actually don't know if this quote applies now that I think about it, but a good plan now is better than a perfect plan later, right? And so if you when you put yourself on a time constraint, you have to come up with a simple plan. An overly complex plan is just not going to work because it's hard to coordinate, it's hard to communicate it, right? You need a simple plan. Nothing crazy, nothing complicated. Just keep it simple. All right, the next one. What do you think it is?
Mass.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, mass. What do you think when we talk about mass? What do you think we're talking about?
Just sheer numbers of people, soldiers, whether it be like the soldiers themselves or weaponry that you have.
Okay, so you want to mass, and these kind of all run together. You want to mass on the objective. You want to mass at the decisive point. Okay, you want to find the enemy's weakest point. You want to mass all your combat power right there, right? All right. What's the next O? What do you think? Offensive. All right. Can we win wars being on the defense? I mean, maybe you can find some obscure time at some point in history where an enemy or a army only won by being on the defense. Maybe it's happened. Okay, and like I said, these principles are not, you don't have to have every single one of these to win. If you have every single one of these, you're much more likely to win, right? But you have to go on the offensive. Everything that you have to do has to be offensively minded. You're moving towards that objective. You're massing your troops at the decisive point, at the enemy's weakest point, to achieve that objective. You're getting after the enemy. All right, offensive. All right, this next one. Unity of command. Okay, so some of this is going to be my opinion and not necessarily doctrine. Okay, there is this idea going around in the Army that I've heard floated that unity of effort is a substitute for unity of command. And I think that is incorrect. I think that is a vital flaw. Okay, when you don't have a unified command structure, trying to get everyone unified in the same direction for the same effort without a actual command structure that supports that is very difficult, if not impossible. Okay, especially when you're dealing with, we talked about war is a human endeavor, right? There are humans, people have different personalities, people have different incentives that people act in accordance with. It's very hard to get people oriented on the same objective. That's why you have to organize your structure in such a way that you can orient people in the right direction. So you want to unify your command structure. One of the sayings that I heard recently and I like to say is, you have to design structurally what you want to produce conceptually. Right? So if you want unity of effort, you have to have a structure that supports it. You have to have unity of command. All right, so far we've got maneuver, objective, surprise, simplicity, mass, offensive, and unity of command. What do we think is next? Do you need anything? You're just hanging out.
You guys here, just your tracker, we're good. Yeah, I sent you the tracker. I'm about
Okay.
to send the AMs.
Sweet. All right, what's next? Okay, security. You always have to secure your forces, right? Supply lines, for example. If you don't secure your supply lines, it's very hard to stay on the offensive, right? It's very hard to achieve that surprise. So you got to secure yourself. Wherever you are, you got to always think security. When the enemy attacks me, am I ready to receive him? All right, so you got to stay, you have to keep your forces secure. All right, what's the last one? Economy of force. All right, so economy of force, you could also say efficiency. Economy of force is you want to achieve your objectives with the minimum force necessary, right? So I was reading a great book called The Psychology of Military Incompetence recently by a British psychologist that talked about how the history of the British Army was rife with officers who were afraid to use too much force. They showed enormous restraint on the battlefield to their detriment, right? They didn't use enough force to complete their objective. Economy of force does not mean not overwhelming the enemy, right? I mean, we say on the offense we want 3-1. We want to assure ourselves of victory. Do we need 12-1? We probably don't need 12-1. That's probably too much, right? We're not leaving anything in reserve. But we want that 3-1. But you still want to use the minimum force necessary to accomplish your objective. And then maybe plus 10% or something like that, right? So like this is, again, these aren't hard and fast. This isn't science, right? This is sort of art. There's a little bit of art to this. And we're going to talk about a little bit about the art and the science of warfare, okay? So let me look at my little cheat sheet here. All right. So these are the principles of war right here that we've laid out. And in a war, you're usually attacking or you're defending, right? Now we talk about this new generation of warfare and how it's characterized by complexity. I have some issues with that personally because I think no matter where you look in history, they thought they were living at the most complex time. So at any point in history, you could be like, yes, complexity characterizes what we do. Right, especially if you look at like how the printing press changed the world, like that made things enormously complex, and it was the most complex that anyone had ever seen. Well, we don't know what the world looks like in 100 years, but I'm gonna go ahead and go out on a limb and say it's probably more complex than what we're living in right now. So I think talking about how the world is complex and complaining about that and trying to organize structures to capture all this complexity is kind of a fool's errand, right? Go with what you know. Stick to principles. Stick to fundamentals. All right, so we talked about characteristics of offense and defense. What are we talking about? These are sort of like principles, but they're not quite. Characteristics. All right, so of offense. It's a great acronym to remember is what?
For offense?
Yeah. Oh, come on, help me out here. No? Okay, SCAT. That's how you remember. That's how you remember the characteristics of the offense. All right, like I said, we talked about this before, is surprise. Yep. Concentration, it's kind of like mass. Concentrate your forces. Audacity. And tempo. All right, we won't this is a whole other class, so we won't really dig into each one of these. But when you're on the offense, it's characterized by these things. So if you think that you're on the offense and you're not surprising your enemy, you're not concentrating your forces, your plan is weak sauce, and you have no tempo, guess what? You're not on the offense. You're something else, right? Don't call what you're doing offense. So if you want to be on the offense, you have to have these things. This is what characterizes the offense, all right? If you didn't know what these were, and you were an aggressive leader who was pretty intelligent and pretty smart, you would just naturally have these things. This is what characterizes the offense. All right, now we talk about defense. The best way to remember defense is PSDMF. When you think PSD, personal security detail, you're defending the VIP. PSDMF, and then you can come up with your own MF. So, PSDMF is, we went over this. You're in this class.
Preparation.
Preparation, there we go. Preparation.
Security.
Security.
Disruption.
Yep, disruption.
Mass effects.
Mass effects.
Flexibility.
And flexibility. All right, remember in that defense class, what did we talk about? Flexibility. Okay. Remember how do you remember this demonstration that we did?
Yes.
These directly counteract these.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? So if you're on the defense and you're not prepared and you don't have good security, you're not going to disrupt the enemy when he comes there, you're not massing your effects at the point that you want to destroy him, and your plan isn't flexible, guess what? You're not on the defense. You're on something else. Maybe you're just sitting there doing nothing, but you're not on defense. This is what characterizes defense. All right, so when we're talking about how do the characteristics of defense counteract the characteristics of offense, what are the relationships that you see here?
So I feel like the massing effects and flexibility would probably counteract surprise.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, sure, why not? What'd you say, security and surprise?
Flexibility as well.
Okay, flexibility, yeah, because if you're flexible, you won't be surprised. You've looked at all the options. I would say if you're prepared, you're probably not going to be surprised, right? If you have good security, you're probably not going to be surprised. Okay, what else?
Disruption could definitely, disrupt like their tempo.
Absolutely, you want to disrupt his tempo.
So
Okay.
kind of goes with audacity as well.
What does?
Disruption as
Disruption goes against audacity, and I would say if you can disrupt his forces and break up his formation, force him to change his formation, then you can also disrupt his concentration, right? He can't concentrate. All right, what else we got? Those are pretty good,
well. Yeah.
right? But you see how these, the characteristics of the defense, directly counteract the characteristics of the offense, right? They're diametrically opposed, okay? If you want a good defense, you have to have these. If you want a good offense, you have to have these. And that's why I said it's important to understand this is the art of warfare. The science of warfare for defense would be what? What doctrine would cover how to do a defense? Engagement area development, probably, right? That would be like a science. It's like, do these steps, right? Preparation doesn't say, hey, do these steps. It just says, look, preparation is what characterizes defense. It's a concept, right? So before you start trying to get into the science of war, you need to understand what are the principles and what are the characteristics behind what I'm doing. You can write a perfectly good doctrinal op order, and you can do great TLPs. But guess what? If you're not achieving surprise, you're not concentrating, you don't have an audacious plan, and you're not able to maintain tempo during execution, I don't care how good you are at the science. Your plan's gonna suck. Okay? And good leaders come up with this naturally, right? These arise out of when we look at successful warfare, this is what comes out of that when we study it, right? Okay, so like I said, let's get into that. Let's get into that art versus science debate a little bit. Not debate. All right, when we talk about art, this is what we're really talking about, is these types of things here. All right, when you think science, what do you think of? Like, when you see art and science, just not even in the context of warfare, just in the context of whatever, like, what do you think of when you think art?
A little bit more creativity.
Okay, creativity. Yeah, that's great. Creativity.
Unique.
Creativity. It's unique. Yeah, that's a great word. Unique. I can't spell. All right. What do you think?
Science is a little more structured.
Okay,
art's a little more
structure.
Free thinking.
Oh, you said structure. What else?
Fact driven.
Fact driven. All right, facts. What else?
It's been proved.
Proved. Okay,
and
proven.
tested.
Proven and tested. All right, either one. Art, science. What do we got?
I really go more for art.
More for art. Creativity, unique. Maybe like lack of boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not bad for now. And when you talk about war, we tend to focus on the science, right? When you're talking about how to do a leader development program, or people want to talk about doing leader development, or they're really talking about like the science. Let's talk about how do we do a combined arms breach, right? How do we do a passage of lines or a link up? How do we fill out a counseling statement, right? Stuff like that. We're very focused on the science of warfare. All right, what too often gets lost is the art. It's because we don't write a lot of doctrine about it, but the doctrine that we write is actually pretty dang good. And you get this from studying like the trends of history, right? You may not get hard science out of it. Like, look, Napoleon did these things with his corps. Like, maybe we don't need to design our corps exactly the way that he did, but what are the lessons that we can pull out of that? What are the principles we can pull out of that? And I would make an argument and say that's more art than it is science. Okay, and that's why it's important to, I think, start with the art and then move into science. You start with the conceptual and you move to detailed. And when you talk about operational design, that's exactly what they're talking about, right? Is move from the conceptual to the detailed. And that's what I would kind of say here. Actually, we can talk about that too. Conceptual to detailed. All right. And again, this is doctrine, right? Some of this is my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's go back to kind of what I was talking a little bit about earlier. If every single soldier understood this, all of this stuff, right? Could we just send all the soldiers out to like fight a war in Afghanistan leaderlessly?
No.
No. Why?
It'd still be chaotic.
It would be really chaotic, right? Well, you can't get away from the chaos. War's always going to be chaos, but yes, we wouldn't be able to concentrate. Do you think that we would, even if everyone understood these principles and these characteristics, do you think we'd be able to achieve them if everybody just did whatever they wanted?
No, because they'd all have like their own point of view and like how to achieve something.
Absolutely. Everyone would have the same concept, but the details would be lost, right? So what do we put in place to implement these, to make sure that we as a nation, when we go to fight a war, that we adhere to these principles, and that when we go on offense or we're on defense, that we're focused on these characteristics to make sure that we are doing the right thing.
Doctrine and regulations.
Doctrine, regulations, okay, what else? We design that's why we have a hierarchical command structure.
Yeah.
Hey, this guy's in charge, right? We have different levels of command to make sure that we're implementing these, to put everyone in the right direction. You can't achieve an objective unless everyone's oriented in the same way, to have one guy that says this is the way that we're going, right? You can't mass at the decisive point, at the enemy's weakest point, without one guy identifying where that is and saying we're all moving there, okay? So the little diagram that I've come up with to help visualize this is, and I think I talked to you a little bit about this yesterday, but if we just put like a whole bunch of little dots down here, these are all the little Jundies, right? All the little soldiers. Okay, so this is like the lowest level. These are privates, specialists, probably down to about the squad level. Squad level leaders are all down here. Right? These are the people who fight. Right? There are those who fight. Just put fight. These are the guys that are actually going to be doing the fighting, actually pulling the triggers, actually putting bayonets in stomachs. Right? Or as Sergeant Major Troxel said, actually hitting ISIS in the face with their e-tools, right? That's these guys, all right? All right, then we have the next level, right? And we'll just put sort of some more dots in there. These are those who lead those who fight. Who do you think that is? Raise your hand. Yeah, that's the platoon leaders, probably and company commanders as well. All right, so we'll just kind of divide these guys up into platoons or into whatever structure you want to call it. Okay, so we have those who lead those who fight. And then we have those who just put like maybe 4 dots up here. All right, these guys, this is the guys who plan and resource. Okay? So I would say that down here, this is very science, right? What's the range of my weapon system? Right? What's the rate of fire? How often do I need to change the barrel? How much suppression can I achieve in a certain amount of time? This is very sciencey, right? This is how do we actually physically win? Very science, okay? Lead, now we're starting to talk a little bit of art, right? Because we have to plan in detail at our level. So now we're looking a little bit at the art of war. All right, I'm tasked with doing a platoon attack. Okay, I need to achieve surprise, concentration, audacity, and tempo. Right, or platoon defense. All right, prepare, secure, disruption, mass effects, flexibility. And I know the science behind this too. I know how to do a doctrinal op order, right? And how to move guys from one place to another. I know how to do EA Dev, right? We do a pretty good job of that, of teaching the science of warfare to you guys. But you also need to keep these in mind. All right, so these are the guys who plan the resource. This is your battalion staff, more or less, or whatever staff, whatever level of analysis you want to look at. This is the staff, okay? And then you have the commander. The commander is one guy, right? Conceptual. Bridge the gap between conceptual and detailed. They take his concept of operation, what he wants to happen, his intent, right? And he gives it to them. And they understand his intent. And they take that intent, which is driven by this, and they put out a detailed plan. This is how we're going to achieve it. They give it to those who lead, who then provide bottom-up feedback, right? Top-down guidance, bottom-up refinement, right? So top-down guidance, and the staff can sometimes tell the commander, look, sir, what you want to do is not going to work. We have to change it in this way. There's constant feedback here, all right, between these different levels of command, all right? And we're building to something here which you're going to be like, pow, as soon as I show you, right? We've kind of talked about this a little, so maybe that light bulb's already gone off. And then here as well, okay, there's this I would say is probably a little bit more top-down. You don't get a lot of bottom-up refinement here because it's kind of part of the bigger plan, but there still needs to be bottom-up refinement because these guys go out and do reconnaissance. Hey, sir, that place that you wanted to defend from, it sucks. You can't see anything. There's no fields of fire. All right, we need to change. So this feedback process is extremely important, and we're going to talk about that in other OPDs when we talk about actual leadership, how to achieve this. All right, because I will tell you right now, if all these arrows are pointing down, you're going to have a commander that is not informed to make the right decisions because he's not getting any bottom-up refinement. All right, maybe he's just a genius and doesn't need to talk to anybody. That's unlikely. Okay, so you have to have that feedback. If you have an organization that's just constant, the arrows are pointing up, that commander is overwhelmed with information. No one's filtering anything. The staff is afraid to push back and provide guidance, right? And the commander has too much information to make a decision. So this needs to be delicately balanced, okay? Top-down guidance, bottom-up refinement. What's important, okay? All right. So the question is, what are we really trying to do? We talked about a commander who is thinking conceptually about what needs to happen, and he can think in detail too. I mean, some commanders are very detail-oriented. It's not that he can't be detailed. Sometimes he sees the battlefield extremely well and can give a lot of detailed guidance to his staff. It just depends. This is just a framework and this is somewhat of my opinion, but I'm going to bridge a gap here in a minute. All right. So the question is, how does this one guy, right, make all of these thousands of people down here all end up at the right place at the right time to surprise the enemy with a simple plan, mass all at the same area with the minimum force required? How can he possibly do all of that? How can this guy make these thousands of people all do that? So maybe these thousands of people are going to this one objective, another 1,000 people are going to another objective. How does he do that? What's the tool that he can use by doctrine?
Mission command.
Bingo! Mission command, right? What's this side? Mission command. All right. That is how commanders get things done, right? Now, what is mission command? And you knew the answer, but you can explain it. Think about it. What's mission command? Just conceptually.
It's being able to, trying to think of how you said it. It's being able to delegate authority that achieves an objective within the commander's intent.
That's pretty good. That's actually pretty close. So I would say I think the Army's definition is something close to the exercise of disciplined initiative within the commander's intent. Okay, that is mission command. Mission command, and the way they teach it at the career course, is mission command is the balance between the art of command and the science of control. Right? Is the balance between the art of command and the science of control. It blends these two things together. Remember I said you have to bridge that gap to be a successful organization. You have to bridge that gap between art and science. You have to move from the conceptual to the detailed. That is why we have mission command. I will move into my opinion again. I think the Army has maybe a little bit lost its way or hasn't explained mission command well. Mission command is not just the 5th paragraph of the operations order, right? Like we think mission command and we think mission command systems like, all right, mission command, S6, go write the mission command paragraph for the battalion op order. Okay, what radio systems are we using to talk, right? That's not mission command. Those are simply tools that enable mission command. Mission command is a philosophy. Okay, mission command is not even, I wouldn't even say that we should use mission command as a verb. Hey, you have mission command of this operation. It's like, well, no, you're just in charge of the operation. Mission command is a philosophy of how you blend the art of command with the science of control. All right, so there's 6 principles to mission command. Do you know what they are?
One is
Use mission orders.
Okay, yeah, use mission orders. So is this art or science? Use mission orders.
Science.
Yeah, science. Okay. 2?
Build cohesive teams through mutual trust.
All right, let's just go through all of them. Build cohesive teams through mutual trust. Trust. All right, 3.
Accept prudent risk.
Accept prudent risk. 4.
Exercise disciplined initiative.
I never spelled this word right. Initiative. All right, 5.
Clear intent.
Yeah, provide clear.
Provide clear intent.
They say provide clear commander's intent. I'm just going to say provide clear intent, and I'll explain why in a minute. Provide clear intent. Sorry, not just intent. Provide clear intent. And 6.
Create shared understanding.
Create shared understanding. All right. So like I said, there's going to be some understanding. Okay. Some doctrine, some Captain Carrot's opinion. They say create shared understanding. I don't think that you can do this without visualization. Period. I think you have to have a visualization. So I would say create shared understanding / visualization. It's very hard. It's not that you can't do it. It's that it's really hard without a shared visualization. Everyone physically looking at the same thing and understanding and be able to explain it. Without that, it's very hard to know that everyone has shared understanding. You can create shared understanding without actual visualization, but I like to put visualization on there. All right, so use mission orders we talked about. That's the science of control, right? That's everyone, when you talk about shared understanding, use mission orders is actually a good example of that without actual visualization, although everyone is physically looking at the same document, right? Even though it's maybe distributed over BFT. All right, build cohesive teams through mutual trust. Is that super sciencey? Is there a science to building a team? No, right? There's that's art of command all the way, right? How do we build a cohesive team through mutual trust?
I mean, there's lots of different ways. I know the Army likes to use PT as a big example because, or going through some type of crucible, in a sense too. Like I know the Calf Scouts, they have their spur rides. They like to use that as like a team building
Okay,
exercise.
so team building, stuff like that. We're going to go a little bit more into that when we talk about leadership, how to build a cohesive team. Because we just throw it up there as a principle, and then I don't think we do a good job of educating our young leaders into actually how to build a cohesive team and how to build mutual trust. All right, accept prudent risk. Does it just accept? Is that there's a reason that the word prudent is there, right? When we're not just saying be reckless. Hey, don't be afraid to accept risk. Okay, accept prudent risk. What does that mean?
You have some kind of understanding or reason behind the risk that you're taking. You're not taking it just to take risk. There's a point to why you're doing it.
Okay, so I would say when you're talking about prudent risk, is that the risk that you're taking is balanced with the expected benefit. That's what I would define as prudent. Okay, you probably look at a dictionary definition, and I'm sure there's great ways and great conversations to be had about what is accept prudent risk. Okay, if you're talking about a huge risk for a huge reward, the bigger the risk and the bigger the reward, the further away you're getting from prudent, right? That doesn't mean you're not being prudent, just means that you're on shaky ground. Okay, so you have to know what risk you can take and what risk you can't take. And a lot of that's communication, up and down, right? Hey, this is a risk I'm seeing, is it worth taking? And asking your boss. You can ask your boss, hey, is this a risk worth taking? So prudent risk is a really good one, but it's sitting down and actually going over and writing down, look, what is the actual risk? And then mitigating it, right? You don't just accept risk, you want to mitigate that risk. All right, 4, exercise discipline initiative. Is this for commanders or is this for?
It's more so for the subordinates, I guess. So like their subordinates.
Right. So exercise discipline initiative. You as a commander, everyone has a commander, except maybe the president, right? Everyone has to exercise discipline initiative. From the lowest private up to General Nicholson. You have to have initiative, right? You cannot just do exactly what you're told. You have to understand your commander's intent, and then you take initiative inside of that. But what's the key word? Discipline initiative, right? Not reckless initiative. Discipline initiative, right? And this is we'll talk about that in a minute, about what this is overall. All right, provide clear intent. The reason I don't like to use commander's intent is because, and like I said, we're going to talk about this in a minute. This is not just for commanders. This is for everybody in the Army. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, provide clear intent. This is what I want to do. Okay, this is the overall picture of what I'm trying to accomplish. Does everyone understand that? Feedback, right? We talked about feedback here. Does everyone understand what my intent is? You, what is my intent? Explain to me my intent. That's not my intent. This is my intent. This is what I want to achieve. All right, create shared understanding. That's like a check on all this other stuff, right? Look, do you understand my intent? Do you understand what decisions you can make and what decisions you can't make? Do you understand what risk is? Have you identified what risks can be taken, right? Do we all understand that as an organization, what's acceptable and what's not? Okay? This is a vision. Mission Command and the principles of Mission Command is an organizational vision. This is what the Army, if every unit in the Army had this and was able to achieve each and every one of these, we would be perfect, right? I mean, there would never be any problems. And the argument that I'm going to make with Mission Command, with the principles of Mission Command, is that it is for everyone. It doesn't stop at company commanders. It doesn't stop at platoon leaders. Look at this and explain to me, make an argument. Maybe you can make an argument. Why can a fire team leader not use the principles of Mission Command? A young E4 who just got promoted to a fire team leader, can he use the principles of Mission Command?
Yeah, because he still has, I mean, I'm assuming as a team leader, he's got his own soldiers and stuff that he has to
Absolutely.
look out after as well.
Can he build a cohesive fire team through mutual trust? Building that trust amongst his soldiers? Hell yeah. Can he accept prudent risk? Sometimes he's going to have to. Sometimes he may have to assume command of a squad and do stuff with the squad. Maybe the platoon leader's dead. Maybe he's got to make decisions. He's got to know what risks are acceptable and what aren't. Can a fire team leader exercise discipline initiative? Absolutely. He doesn't need to be told 100% all the time what to do. He can see what needs to be done and actually go and do it. Right? He can take initiative. And it's up to leaders, all leaders at all levels, to enable that. Can he provide a clear intent of what he wants to accomplish to his fire team? Yeah, absolutely. Look, and a lot of times, most of the times, it's going to be nested with his squad leader's intent, who's nested with his platoon leader's intent, who's nested with the company commander's intent. So everyone's intent is nested, right? So yeah, he can absolutely provide clear intent of what he wants to accomplish. Sometimes it's communicating, sometimes it's just clearly communicating his commander's intent. But he can take that intent and make it his own. In fact, that'd be great. I'm a company commander, and I would love if every team leader took my intent and made it their own, right? Hey, that's my intent, right? That's perfect. Now we have a team that's really gelling. All right, create shared understanding. Can a fire team leader do that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, look, man. Here's the map. This is where this is where we are. This is where we need to go. We're moving from here to here using that route, right? Do we all understand that that's what's going on? Snuffy, if you get lost, what's the azimuth from here to here, right? We're creating shared understanding. There's no reason a fire team leader can't do that. All right. So, and we're going to talk this a little bit more when we talk about leadership. We've talked about the art of war, and we're starting to get in a little bit in the science of war, and how does the Army's command structure actually work, and what's the ideal structure look like? Okay, this looks pretty good, right? When you start looking at it, this starts to break down a little bit, all right? And it takes good commanders and good leaders to identify what those problems are and make adjustments, okay? All right, so this is, we're moving into Captain Crow's final opinion here, which is based purely on my experience in the Army with the units that I've been in and a lot of the leaders that I've had. Luckily, not the current leadership, okay? The current leadership is vastly different from what I've had. And you guys, hopefully, you think that you have good leadership here in this battalion and in this company, but you may not throughout the rest of the Army. So I'm going to provide this to you in the context of this is what I want you to go and do when you are as leaders now and as you continue as leaders in the future. Okay, there is a proclivity, especially amongst the officer corps, but also in the NCO corps. There is an effort to infantilize you, right? To say, you are a new lieutenant. I must tell you everything exactly that you must do. I can give you no responsibility and I can trust you with nothing. And I have to do everything for you, right? And I'm not willing to accept any risk that if I give you something that you might fail. I'm going to treat you like a baby, right? Does that jive with this?
No.
No, not at all, right? You have to treat people like adults. But guess what? You have to sometimes force your leaders to treat you like an adult. Okay, so what I like to say is, if you do not, what words did I actually use? Fight. If you do not fight to be treated like an adult, you will be treated like a child. All right. Don't treat your soldiers like children. Treat them like adults. They're grown men and women. They can make mistakes. You have to underwrite those mistakes as leaders. You have to accept risk. Okay? This is going away. I think more and more it's going away. So there's a great brigade commander I had, Colonel Kaufman, who did some similar videos like this and talked about, look, you can't just take away somebody's responsibility when they mess up or when they show that they're not necessarily competent enough to do the job. You can't just take it away and then keep it. You take away that power, that responsibility, you retrain them, you give them your expectations, and then you give it back. Okay? Sometimes bosses don't do that. So you have to show up and you have to be competent. And you have to work. And you have to say, sir, you can treat me like an adult. Right? You can trust me with that. I will deliver for you. Accept the risk of giving me this huge thing. And I'll deliver for you. Right? You have to fight to be treated like an adult. Because when you fight to be treated like an adult, now you're forcing your commander and your leader to adhere to these principles. And you're making your organization better. Okay? Because if you're adhering to these principles, you can't treat your soldiers, whether they're a private or whether they're a sergeant or a lieutenant, it doesn't matter. If we want to succeed as an organization, we have to adhere to these principles, which means you cannot infantilize your officers, you cannot infantilize your NCOs or your soldiers. Really, we should put soldiers on there too. Okay? And it's done at every level, right? There are toxic colonels who infantilize their battalion commanders, who infantilize their company commanders, who infantilize their platoon leaders. Okay? But guess what? There are also team leaders who treat their soldiers like children, who don't trust them, who don't allow them to exercise discipline initiative, who don't allow them to exercise prudent risk. All right, so we have to fight this as an army. We have to be adults, right? You have to prove your competence every single day you come into work. All right? Well, that's it. That's the class. What questions you guys got?